And good afternoon, producer Susan. How's life in State College, PA tonight?
Well, we just had a torrential thunderstorm roll by, so hopefully that has cleared out.
No hail, no hail, no tornadoes.
Nope,
All right. It's
at
going to
least
be
not yet.
it's going to be 88 here in New Jersey. By the way, today is Tuesday, April 14th, and tomorrow is going to be tax day, April 15th. You get your taxes filed?
I did.
You did. And well, on tax day, it's going to be 88 degrees here, a new record. That's a pretty looking cat you got there. All right. You want to hear what we're going to try to talk about today? I probably have too much to fit in. We don't have any clips other than our taxpayer relief shop, but I got a bunch of other stuff. So, anyway, our quote today, this week, is from Economist Thomas Sowell on why you've heard the phrase people say Johnny can't read is a big problem.
Uh-huh.
Well, according to Thomas Sowell, that's not the biggest problem this country's facing, and I'll tell you why. And our stupidest thing I've heard all week, we have a clip of Senator Cory Booker proposing a new tax plan that would have most of the people paying zero income tax.
Mm.
And I'll tell you why that I think that's incredibly stupid. Um, we'll tell you how the extension of the tax. By the way, the big beautiful bill. A lot of people don't know this. When the Trump tax plan first went into effect that was passed in 2017, went into effect on January 1 of 2018. All of the new lower tax brackets and increased standard deductions and the doubling of the child tax credit, because of restrictions in what's called uh, the reconciliation process, there was a limit on how much they could cut and have it passed into the reconciliation, which bypassed the filibuster. Anyway, all of those new lower tax brackets and increased standard deductions were set to expire at the end of 2025. Well, in the big beautiful bill got passed, that Trump signed into law on July 4th of last year, made those lower tax brackets and increased standard deductions permanent. And we're going to tell you what the impact of those benefits to the middle class were, as kind of an offset, a counter to what Senator Booker's proposing. Um, I don't know if you've heard, you hear the Postal Service is running out of money and wants to raise the price of stamp and is stopping contributions to their pension plan. Did you hear that?
I have heard that, yes.
Well, we're going to tell you how
They
serious
want to
that is.
cut services and raise prices.
Cut services, raise prices, and stop contributing to the pension plan. I'll tell you why that's a very dangerous thing. Um, Now, you've heard all the objections, by the way, about the SAVE Act, about voter ID and
Mhm.
have to show a voter ID. Well, we're
Yep.
going to tell you which state is now requiring a photo ID if you want to return. In some states you have to pay when you buy like a six pack of soda. There's a deposit on each bottle or can.
Yeah.
Well, one state now is demanding that you have a photo ID if you want to return those empty, empty cans and bottles to get your deposit back. Um, if we have time, we'll tell you a study out of Finland that looked at the long-term effect of sex assignment surgeries performed on preteens and young adults. And our taxpayer relief shot this week is not from a citizen, but it's where the police decided to intentionally run over and kill a gunman
Uh,
who had shot and killed one of their officers. They just said, "Screw it, we're going to run him over and kill him." First time I've ever heard that. All right. So here's a quote from Thomas Sowell on why Johnny can't read and why he doesn't believe that Johnny can't read isn't the biggest problem facing this country. And by the way, we've done all these in the past. We talked about how 80% of the kids graduating Chicago public schools can't read at grade levels. We've talked about those things, right?
mhm. Yeah.
Well, and here's what Thomas Sowell has to say about that. It's true that in too many big cities, Johnny can't read is a problem. But he said the biggest problem isn't that Johnny can't read. The problem isn't even that Johnny can't think. The problem is Johnny doesn't even know what he's thinking about. He confuses it with feelings. In other words, he doesn't think through problems. He makes decisions on feelings and emotions. So let me read that again. The problem isn't that Johnny can't read. The problem isn't even that Johnny can't think. The problem is that Johnny doesn't know what thinking even is. He confuses thinking with feelings. And this gets back to people who were confused, who were protesting. They were supporting Hamas in Gaza. You know, they that was they didn't think, they didn't do any research. It was all based on feelings and emotions. So, do you have any thoughts on the difference between people acting on feelings and people acting on thinking and logic?
Yeah, I mean, I think we let too much of our emotions get in the way of rational decision making.
Right. And we don't, and you've heard the term confirmation bias, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Where people, they hear something and it appeals to a belief they've hold, maybe not true, but it's a belief they've hold dear, and they will automatically accept it and act on it without even thinking about fact checking. And that's what we have in this country today. Is
Hmm.
too much people acting on emotion. No kings. By the way, I want to say thanks to all those people. What was it, 2 weeks ago they had the No Kings protest. I checked, and as of this morning, 2 weeks later, we still don't have a king in this country. So all those people who came out and protested, great job. You've held it off. We don't have a king. So thank you for doing that. All right. Now, stupidest thing I've heard all week, Senator Cory Booker proposing a new tax system based on a huge lie that would have more than 75% of the people in this country paying no income tax. Now, this I call this pandering to voters as its worst. Now, first, let's start with this. Do you know that 47% of the people in this country currently either pay zero or less than zero in income taxes? Did you
That's a
know that?
lot. No, I that seems really high.
It's true. I'll give you an example, by the way. Today, a family with two kids making $65,000 a year under the Trump tax plan, that family, 65,000 a year with two minor children, is already paying less than zero. In other words, if when they file, they get back 100%, they get back everything they paid in plus there's something called a refundable tax credit. Like when you claim your $2,000 per child tax credit. And let me explain how that works. Let's say you do your taxes and before you figure in your child tax credit, you owe 3,800. Well, under the Trump tax plan, you get not an income deduction, you get a tax credit of $2,000 per child. Well, if you owed 3,800 and then you claim two $2,000 credits, that's a $4,000 tax credit. Now you take it right off the taxes you owe, which means instead of paying 3,800, the government actually sends you a check for $200. You get back
Mhm.
everything with what that was withheld plus an extra $200. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
It's called a refundable tax credit. So we already have almost half the people in this country aren't already paying any income taxes. And the rest that do, by the way, are only paying about, on average, about 8%. But Cory Booker literally pandering to the middle class, he's proposing a revision to the tax plan that would exempt, you ready for this? He would increase the standard deduction for a married couple, and this is before outing, to $75,000, which means the first $75,000, if you're a married couple, no kids, you don't pay any taxes at all. Now, if you have kids, oh, and he wants to then, now the Trump tax plan already doubled the child tax credit from 2,000 to from 1,000 to 2,000, and he wants to double that to 4,000. Well, that means if you're a married couple making 100,000 per year and you have one child, not only will you not pay an income tax, you'll get money back. Well,
Wow.
actually, that means a married couple with two kids and a household income of 145,000. Let me back up. So under what he is proposing, that means if you're a married couple with two kids and a household income of 145,000 per year, would be paying less than zero in federal income taxes. In other words, they would qualify a refundable tax credit. Now, he attempts to justify that proposal with a lie, claiming, and this is a quote, pay an effective tax rate less than most middle class families. Now, let me tell you what that,
But that's, I mean, making $145,000 for a family of four, that is middle class.
right,
That's up, in my opinion, that's upper middle class.
upper middle class, and under what he's proposing, they would pay less than zero in federal income taxes. Now, he uses this term effective tax rate. Have you ever heard effective tax rate?
That's where after your deductions and everything, right?
Well, that's what it should be, but what they do now, they play this game. They look at people like Musk and Jeff Bezos, and they say, well, yeah, I'm going to make up a number. Well, he had 4 million of cash income, and he paid 1 million in taxes. But the value of the stock he held increased by $50 million. So what they do now, if there is no definition of income, either in accounting or or IRS definition, that includes the increase in the value of an asset you own, like your house or stock, as income. But
But
what they
that's,
what
you don't count your house or stocks as income when you're paying your taxes.
but that's what Cory Booker and liberals like him do. What they do is they don't tell you what they're doing. When they come up with they've made up this term called effective tax rate, where they add to your actual income the increase in the value of the stock. In the case of Musk and Bezos, the number of shares that Elon Musk owns is public record, and you can go in the stock market charts and you can see how much the value of his stock increased in any given year. So what he does is he'll say that, um, uh, well, Musk pays an effective tax rate of 3.2%, which is nonsense. Musk pays about a 30% tax rate. But what he does is he adds the increase in the value of the stock that Musk owns that he hasn't sold yet, and he adds that to his actual income and then divides by the taxes, and he comes up with this 3% effective tax rate. So, what are the real numbers? That according to and you can find this data on the IRS website. According to this data, the top 1% pay an effective income tax rate of 20%, 26% of their gross income, not their net taxable income, gross income. That's before they take any deductions. While the typical middle class family pays an effective tax rate of less than 8% of their gross income, less than 8%. So what he's doing, he's using phony math to pander to the electorate and trying to mislead them with lie, trying to make them think that they're paying more in income taxes than the top 1%. And of course, this country is already running a 1.5 trillion per year deficit, and he
Mhm.
wants to knock out all of the tax revenue being paid by the
Yeah.
bottom 75% of the taxpayers in this country. We
I mean,
already
like
have
I said, I think 100 and
45,000
according to
with
that math, $145,000 for a family of four, in
and
my opinion, that is upper middle class. If
right,
you're
and they should
making
be
six
paying, yeah,
figures,
yeah.
you're doing all right.
But if you're that family and you see Cory Booker, aren't you going to vote for Cory Booker?
Well, of course.
Well, duh, yeah. That's what I talk about pandering, pandering to the electorate. I just think it's
Mhm.
despicable. I think that's the word I was looking for, despicable. Anyway, and if you hear any liberals saying that the top 1% pay a lower effective income tax rate than the middle class, what they're doing. By the way, they don't say, well, what was the increase in the value of the homes that owned by the middle class? They only do it for the top 1%. They say, well, how much did the value of the stock, like, Jeff Bezos, how much did well, we're going to add that to his income and pretend it was actual income. They never say, how much did the middle class houses increase? So it's nonsense. The top 1% are pay the highest tax rate of any group. Anyway, so as long as we're talking about taxes, let's talk about the one big beautiful bill that Trump made last year, which also included, by the way, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and increase the standard deduction for people receiving Social Security benefits. I don't know, do you remember that?
Yeah.
So for each person, like for a household of two, by the way, if both the husband and wife are on Social Security, they get to add an extra. But I believe the current deduction for a married couple is 31,000, which means the first 31,000 of their income is not subject to tax. Well, he added another 6,000 per person, which is 12,000, which means a married couple under the Trump tax plan that he signed into law last year. So if you add 31,000 and 12,000, the first 43,000 of income for a married couple on Social Security is no longer subject to any tax. So, but here's what the big beautiful deal provided. The working families tax cut for Americans under 50,000 by almost 15%. 66% of the working families tax cuts uh, benefited families making less than 500,000. And the tax cut and economic growth for working families increased the take-home pay this is take-home pay by family of four on average by $10,900. That's what the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act did. 10,900. And let me tell you the reduction in taxes with working class families. If you were making less than 50,000, that bill is going to reduce your taxes by 15%. If you're making between 50 and 100, it's going to reduce your tax burden by 12%. And if you're making between 100 and 500,000, which a lot of people in California it's going to reduce their tax burden by 10%. So the claim that that only the top 1% benefited from the Trump tax plan is an easily demonstrated lie. And if anybody wants the data, I can send you the whole big analysis and the charts and everything else. But no, every income group under 500,000 got a significant reduction in their taxes. All right.
I think one of the other huge misconceptions, by the way, since tomorrow is tax day, you don't want to have a tax refund.
No,
You
you
want
let
your taxes to be zero or as
zero,
close to zero as possible.
close to zero as possible, or if you have to write them $100, big deal. But
Because that is not a refund. That is money that was your money that you overgave the government.
right, you lent them money, you lent them interest, you gave them an interest-free loan.
Yeah.
So if you're getting a three
That is, I
thousand
think, one
dollars,
of the
yeah,
biggest misconceptions I hear among my friends is, oh, I'm getting this great big refund.
yeah,
No, you're getting your money back that you gave too much of.
yeah. So if you're getting a $3,000 refund, well, what that means is you lent the government $3,000 of
Mhm.
money to you lent the government $3,000 interest-free. So I'd rather have that $3,000 in my savings account earning
Yeah,
interest instead of letting the government
exactly.
hold it interest-free. All right. So let's move on to the post office. So we talked at the beginning about the post office running out of money. They want to raise the price of stamp. They want to cut service. And I don't know if you had heard that they have this month stopped contributing to the employee pension plan. Did
That part
you?
I didn't hear.
Well, and let me tell you why that's so important. Now, let me back up. 50, 60 years ago, um, it was pretty much standard practice for both big companies to have what was called a defined benefit pension
Mhm.
plan. And I
Yep.
think you still have one if you work for the university, or you work for the
Yep.
state or city. There's two types of pension plans. One is defined benefit, one is defined contribution. Now, defined contribution is easy. It's 401k. You put in so much, your employer puts in so much, but they
Hmm.
make you no promises. They're going to say, hey, it's a defined contribution. This is how much we're going to put in. Oh, by the way, you don't have to put in anything, but we promise you we're going to put in this much every month. But however, we make no promises as to what that fund is going to be worth when you retire. And if you outlive the money, well, we made you no promises. Defined benefit, on the other hand, when you go to work for a when you used to go to work for a company that had defined benefit, they gave you a little booklet that said, "Here's an equation that how to calculate your benefit." So if you're going to take your highest 3 years of salary times so many percent for every year that you work, maybe it was 2% per year. So if you work for 30 years at 2%, you would get 60% of your average highest three salaries every year for the rest of your life. It was a
Hmm.
defined, and if you live to be 107, we're going to keep paying that till you're
Yep.
107. So it was a defined benefit. They defined the benefit, not the contribution. But what happened is as people began living longer and longer, those defined benefit plans got very, very expensive.
Hmm.
So most private sector employers, well, let me tell you what happened first. Prior to 1974, you had all these big companies were making all these defined benefit promises, and all of a sudden they would get into trouble and the financial trouble, and they would go bankrupt. And guess what? They hadn't put that money aside. So all those promises about defined benefit, well, gee, sorry, yeah, we know we promised you that pension, but we're bankrupt and you're nothing more than an unsecured creditor. So sorry, you're not going to get the pension. Now, teachers, state employees, city employees, federal employees, they all still have defined benefit, as do many union employees have a defined benefit. But anyway, to address this issue of companies going bankrupt and not having the money to pay out the pensions for 50, 60 years into the future, Congress in 1974 passed something called the ERISA Act, Employee Retirement Investment Savings Act, that says any private sector employer with a defined benefit plan must contribute money monthly into an independently managed pension plan trust fund in an amount adequate to fund the pension obligations not only of all currently retired employees for the rest of their lives, but the earned pension benefits of existing employees who may not retire for another 30 or 40 years. Let me explain something like that. So let's say you're working for a company that says, hey, if you've worked at least 5 years, when you retire, you can go to the book and you can calculate. Well, let's say you're 26 years old, you started working for this company when you were 21. Even though you're only 26, per their plan, 40 years from now or 39 years from now, when you reach age 65 and you retire, per the booklet, it may not be a big pension, but you've already earned at age 26, you've already earned a pension, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So, so the ERISA Act said not only do you have to have enough money in the fund to pay out current retirees for the rest of their lives, based on statutory tables, what's the name, actuarial tables. You also have to contribute enough money to make sure that when those 26-year-olds reach age 65, that there's enough money to pay their pensions. Well, that was great, and it was a very needed thing. So every big company, every month now, that still has a defined pension plan, has to kick money into a third-party trust fund. And if they go bankrupt, it doesn't matter because that money is in a trust fund that's outside of the bankruptcy.
Mhm.
However, when Congress passed that law, you know who they exempted?
Themselves.
All governmental entities, city, county, state, federal, and include the US Post Office. So while the US Post Office has been voluntarily contributing $400 million per month into the Post Office defined benefit plan, and by the way, the Post Office has postal employees have a very, very lucrative pension plan. It's so lucrative that they were having to contribute 400 million per month into the pension plan just to keep it adequately funded, not only to pay their current retirees, but all the people who might retire over the next 4 decades. Well, the post office is such financial straits right now. They said, um, we can't afford to do that. We're going to stop contributing 400 million a month. Now, if they were a private employer, it would be illegal for them to do that. But because Congress exempted city, county, state, and federal entities from ERISA, they're free to do that. But if you're a postal employee, wouldn't you be worried
Yeah,
that? And by the way, the federal government can't go bankrupt, but you know the post office can go bankrupt.
because they're actually not they're not run by the government.
Well, they're a federal entity, but they're a separate legal. They're a corporation. They're a legal
Mhm.
entity. They're not
Yeah.
the federal government. And let me go back and it's not just restricted to the post office. Um, you ever heard of something called CalPERS?
No, that's the California, right?
California Employee Pension Plan. It is
Yeah.
the largest pension plan in the United States. The largest pension plan in the United States. Every state employee, county employee, because all the municipalities, instead of starting their own pension plan, were invited to participate in CalPERS. So every city, state, county employee in the state of California is enrolled in CalPERS. In Colorado, they have PARA, Public Employee Retirement, which is where all the teachers and state employees are. Both of those pension plans are grossly underfunded because they're not covered by ERISA. Now, let me have 10 years ago, 11 years ago, the city of Detroit had a defined benefit pension plan. The city of Detroit declared bankruptcy. And all the people getting their pension went to the bankruptcy court and said, well, you know, we were promised this pension. You know what the judge said to all those employees, retirees? You're nothing more than another unsecured creditor, and you're all going to have to take a haircut. You know what taking a haircut means?
Uh, Taking a pay cut.
Yeah, pay cut. In other words, so let's say I'm going to make up a number. Let's say you were getting 3,200 a month as a pension. The judge maybe knocked it down to 2,100 a month because you know all the creditors. And so in other words, if the city of Detroit could only pay 60 cents on the dollar to their creditors, that's the same cut that all the retirees got. And I'm afraid right now that you know postal service employees could be looking at the same thing. But of course, you know what's going to happen. Congress is going to want to bail out the post office if it comes to that.
Hmm.
Personally, I think the post office needs to take some radical steps, like cutting residential delivery down to 3 days a week for as a starter. I don't know, but the post office has been a world, and I think they've been postponing the inevitable, and I think this is bringing it to a head. So,
Living in a small little town, we don't have mail service in my little town. We have a post office where everybody goes to the post office. I mean, it's open Monday through Friday. It's open on Saturday, and of course, the lobby is open after hours. The post office is like the community center of
yeah.
our little town. And
Yeah, and
going to the post office to get your mail is like a social event because
sure. You know,
you know
but even if even if you're housebound or whatever, I think 3 days. If half your town got Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the other half got Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I don't think that would be a hardship. And on those rare occasions where you had some urgent letter, you had to get picked up, you could go to the post office on the off day and pick up that urgent letter. But I got to tell you, in the past 5 years, 3 days a week would have been just fine for me. Wouldn't have been a single week where three mail delivery 3 days a week wouldn't have
I
been
mean,
problems.
I only go once, maybe twice a week to the post
Yeah.
office.
So, Congress has to do something about post office, maybe letting them make cuts like that or mandating cuts like that. But this thing about, no longer contributing to the pension fund, that's a time bomb, just waiting to go off. Um, anyway, just folks, talk to your congressman about the post office no longer contributing to the pension fund and what's going to happen when the money runs out. All right. How much time we got left?
You got a little less than 10 minutes.
All right. Did you ever watch this? Did you watch all the Seinfeld episodes?
Oh yeah.
Do you see the one where Kramer and what was the mailman?
Norman.
Norman,
Norman.
where they found out that Michigan was offering like 10 cents a bottle,
Yeah.
and they loaded up the back of the mail truck with, cans, and they were going to
Hmm.
drive to Michigan to make a killing.
Yeah.
Well, in 2024, the state of Connecticut increased its bottle and can deposit from 5 cents to 10 cents per can or bottle. Now, some neighboring states only have five, and other states have zero. Like Jersey has no can deposit. So what happened is when they went
Newman. It was Newman, not Norman.
Not
Newman.
yeah, Newman.
Newman.
Yeah, they loaded up the back of the mail truck with cans and bottles, and were going to drive to Michigan to get the 10 cents. All right. Well, what was happening is once they went to 10 cents, people from neighboring states were saving up, and people were going like to baseball, like to parks where like Little League, and they would empty
Hmm.
out the trash cans. They would pick the bottles out from the baseball from the Little League parks. Because people are throwing away their Gatorade bottles and whatnot. Anyway, people were showing up with thousands of bottles. They'd save them up for 6 months. So Connecticut, which has been fighting the passage of the Save Act, what they say, well, if you're gonna return bottles to our one of our recycling centers, you have to show in-state proof of residency, photo ID showing that you're that you're a resident of the state of Connecticut. So how's that for hypocrisy?
Yeah.
All right. You don't need a photo ID to vote, but if you want to return a bottle in this state, you gotta show photo ID proving that you're a resident of the state of Connecticut. If anybody wants that link, producer Susan will put that
Yep.
up on the
Yep.
website, or if you want to email me, I can send it to you. All right. Real quick, Finland, gender affirming care. Finland has done a 25-year-long study that looked at the differences between people that suffered from what's called gender dysphoria. They weren't sure if they wanted to be a boy or a girl when they were younger. And some of those people had what's called gender affirming care, surgical care. They had their breasts removed or their testicles removed and whatever. And the other group didn't. They had psychiatric care and whatever. Well, it turns out after 25 years, you know which group is faring better in terms of their psychological mental health?
Which group?
The group that didn't have the gender affirming care.
Yep. I believe that.
The group that had the surgeries and the hormone treatments, psychiatric needs did not subside. I'm reading from the study, did not subside after medical reassignment. Those adolescents that did had, and this is a quote, had markedly higher psychiatric morbidity. Now, you know what psychiatric morbidity is?
Uh, s- Suicide death. I
Yeah, you either committed suicide or you're contemplating committing suicide. So all these parents, who think, oh yeah, my 11-year-old, she wants to be a boy or he wants to be a girl, and they rush their kids into a gender reassignment surgery. Your chances are better than 50-50 that that child is going to be worse off when they become an adult because you rushed into something that you should have
The
at least.
surgery should not be allowed for children.
I agree. Hey, if they're 18 and they want to do it on their own, great.
Exactly. If you're an adult and you can want to continue, that's great. But as a child, I don't think it should be allowed as a child.
Yeah, and the data is crystal clear. The incidence of suicide and psychiatric morbidity, it's like night and day. And it's a very long study. I won't try to bore you with the study. And if you want to read the study, there'll be a link to it on the
Mhm.
website. But it does far more harm than good. All right, you want to hear our taxpayer relief shot?
Yeah.
All right. Now remember, normally it's a citizen protecting themselves. But there was a shootout in California, and a guy with a high-powered rifle shot several cops, killing one. And the problem they had is, if the guy had a high-powered rifle, you couldn't get close to him. You couldn't use a taser. It was dangerous to get near the guy. So, do you know what a bear cat is?
Like uh like an ATV.
Yeah, it's a big armored police vehicle like that SWAT uses. You ever
Yeah.
see in the shows?
Yeah.
It's an armored vehicle, bulletproof windshields. So here's what the police in Kern County, California did to this guy armed with a high-powered rifle that was shooting cops.
Well, this situation's resolved. The suspect is now dead. He was not shot. Um, One of the Bearcats ran over him and killed him. We intentionally ran him over. Kern County Sheriff's Office. Don't shoot at cops. You shoot at cops, we're going to run you over. He got run over. He got what he deserved. This situation's resolved.
So, how about what's your reaction to that one? We ran him over on purpose. We
Perfect.
ran, we ran him over and
I mean,
killed
if
him.
you have to do what you have to do to stop somebody who's, hurt you.
Yeah, he already shot three or four cops, killing one. And they figured, okay, well, it's dangerous for us to try to get close to this guy because he's got a high-powered rifle. Let's just run him over with our Bearcat.
Yeah.
And problem solved. Next. So, all right. All right. Anything you want to add before we wrap up?
There was one I saw on the news last night. It was this was in California in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco area. A mother and baby were hiding in the closet because a crazy man was trying to break into their house. Dad's watching this whole thing on the Ring camera, and dad rushes home with nothing armed but with a shovel. And I got to give the dad credit because when he finally gets in the house and confronts this man who was already in the house, by the way, looking, again, the mom and daughter are hiding in the closet. The dad was calm and cool and collected and de-escalated the situation.
Did he kill the guy or just
No, he just walked in. He said, "Hey, are you military?" And the guy said, "Yeah." He goes, "I know what you're going through." And he just like
oh,
immediately, man, if I because I'm thinking, man, any other dad out there would be like, "I gotta save my wife and kid."
yep.
And this guy just walked. I'll send you the clip. It was astonishing how this dad handled the situation.
Okay. All right. Hey, two quick things. 60 Minutes this past Sunday, two great stories. One about why all the great white sharks
Yeah,
around.
I saw that. Yeah.
We'll talk about that next week, and also about these trucking companies that are changing names.
Yeah. I saw
We'll
that.
talk.
That was another great one.
Yeah, we'll talk about that next week. But 60 Minutes had two great stories on these fly-by-night trucking companies. And I say fly-by-night, they're huge. By the way, I didn't know there were 700,000 trucking companies in
Yeah,
this
that was
country.
astonishing number. And that truck, I won't mention it, but that trucking company, that logo, I see those trucks on the road all the time.
Yeah, and how when they get in trouble, they just peel the decal off and put a different decal on.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the I'm talking about the parent company truck.
yeah. We'll talk about that next week. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, folks, we're running out of time, so I want to thank everybody for giving up 30 minutes out of your busy day to listen to me ramble on about things I find of interest and importance. Um, and I hope you did too, and I hope you listen in the weeks and months to come. If you want to see some materials and story links you heard us talk about today, give producer Susan a day or two. You'll be able to find them on the Jerzee Joe website at jerseyjoe.com. With Jersey being spelled J-E-R as in Robert, Z as in zebra, E-E, Jerzee, jerseyjoe.com with no space. If you'd like me to send you one of those story links, just email me to joe@jerseyjoe.com. Or if you want me to put you on our distribution list for the weekly podcast, again, just send me an email to joe@jerseyjoe.com. Just remember to spell Jersey with an R, a Z, and two E's. And with that, producer Susan, unless you have something to add, I'll sign off.
Nope. All right.
Talk to you next week. Take care.